The unexpected tapestry. Adrian Vanavar didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in control, in calculated outcomes and things going exactly as planned. So when the invitation to a prestigious charity gala arrived, he accepted it with little thought. It was just another night of handshakes, networking, and forced smiles, a tax deduction in a designer suit. He didn't expect anything different, but fate had other plans. The event was held at the Metropolitan Art Gallery in Buenos Aires, a venue he hadn't visited in years. As he stepped out of his sleek black car, everything around him felt sterile and scripted, just the way he liked it. That is, until he walked in. The crowd was a blur of familiar faces from the business world, journalists, politicians, and socialites. He was halfway through a conversation with a venture capitalist about overseas investments when a flash of movement caught his attention from across the room. A woman stood near the marble staircase, a young girl clutching her hand. The girl's laughter was light, unfiltered, and full of life. And the woman, she was Eliza. He hadn't seen her in 4 years, not since the night she left without a slam of a door or a single tear. That night had haunted him. She had looked at him with more silence than fury. She had said, "You were with her," and walked away. He hadn't chased her. He just stood there in the middle of his apartment, paralyzed by the truth of what he had done, and watched her disappear. He thought time would dissolve her memory. He was wrong. Now, standing in that luxurious room surrounded by crystal chandeliers and empty chatter, she was there. Her hair was longer, darker. Her frame was smaller than he remembered, as if life had demanded too much of her. But her eyes were the same. Clear, stormy, a grayish blue, like a sky before a storm. The little girl beside her looked up at her mother, then turned to face Adrian, and something inside him stopped. The girl's eyes were the same shade of blue as his own. Her hair, a dark brown, almost black. Something in her expression, curious, observant, and serious, made his heart falter. He took a step toward them, his pulse quickening. But Eliza noticed him first. Her body instantly tensed, and she instinctively pulled the child a little closer. Her gaze met his. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just looked at him like a threat she had prepared for. When he finally stopped in front of her, his throat dry, he tried to find words that didn't sound rehearsed. "Eliza," he said. "Steady." She stared back, impassive. "Adrian." Her voice was quiet, flat, too even. "It's been a long time." He nodded. "I didn't expect to see you here." She tilted her head slightly. "No, I'm sure you didn't." Her eyes flickered to the little girl, but before he could ask a question, Eliza cut him off. "No," she said sharply. "She is not yours." The phrase hit him with the force of a car crash. He didn't react at first. He just stood there, blinking, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "Eliza, no," she said again, more firmly this time. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. You don't have the right to ask. You don't have the right to wonder. You lost that right a long time ago." Hibara looked back at the girl. She looked at him, silent, curious, oblivious to the storm raging between the adults in front of her. "She looks," he started, but Eliza shook her head. "She's not yours," she repeated. "Good night, Adrian." And with that, she turned. No drama, no scene, just her retreating figure and the soft click of the girl's shoes on the marble floor as they disappeared into the crowd. Adrian was left frozen, surrounded by wealth, power, and people who didn't even notice he was falling apart. The gala continued without him, music playing, glasses clinking in celebration of causes no one truly cared about. But inside him, something had shifted. Something real. And for the first time in years, Adrian Vanavar didn't feel in control. He felt regret. He felt loss. And he felt something terrifyingly like hope. A father's reckoning, the days that followed the gala passed in a haze for Adrian. He went through the motions of running his company, attending board meetings, approving investment proposals, giving the same polished speeches that always earned him applause. But none of it settled him. Nothing distracted him from the image of Eliza, standing in that ballroom, her hand protectively around the child, her voice cold when she told him, without a shred of hesitation, that the girl was not his. He tried to convince himself to let it go. She had made her choice. She had walked away. And if that child truly wasn't his, then this should have been over. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just Eliza. The girl. Her eyes. Her quiet intensity. The unspoken familiarity in her expression unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. That night had woken something deep inside him that refused to be silenced. He didn't know if it was guilt, longing, or something even more terrifying. Instinct. For the first time in years, Adrian left the office early. He sat alone in his penthouse, looking at old photos he hadn't seen since the breakup. Eliza smiling on the beach. Eliza with her hair wet from the rain, wrapped in one of his old sweaters. Eliza asleep on his chest in the early days, before he ruined everything. Back then, he was building his empire, climbing every ladder in sight, convincing himself that love would wait while he chased a legacy. But time hadn't waited, and neither had she. Unable to shake the feeling, he found himself calling someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Javier, an old mutual friend who still moved in some of the same circles as Eliza. He didn't ask directly. He didn't mention the child. Instead, he casually brought up the gala and said he had seen someone he didn't expect. Javier hesitated at first. Then he said what Adrian didn't want to hear, but needed to know. Yeah, Eliza's been through a lot. A single mom. Strong as anyone. She's a nurse now. It's not easy, but she's doing well. Her daughter's name is Cora. Sweet little girl. That name echoed in Adrian's mind long after the call ended. Cora. A name he had never heard, but now couldn't forget. Later that night, he sat in his car, parked in front of a small clinic on the quiet side of town, where Javier said Eliza worked. He hated himself for being there. It felt like an invasion, but he couldn't stay away. He waited until just before closing, and then he saw her. Eliza walked out of the doors in a pale medical uniform, her hair in a tired bun, looking completely different from the confident woman he had seen at the gala. She looked exhausted. Real. Human. A few seconds later, Cora came out of the staff entrance, holding the hand of a kind-faced older woman, probably a co-worker helping with childcare. Cora saw Eliza and ran into her arms. She giggled as she was scooped up, hugging her mom's neck. And Eliza smiled. A real smile, soft and warm, the kind Adrian remembered from another life. That was the moment he realized what he was most afraid of. It wasn't that the child might not be his. It was that she might be. That Eliza had been raising her alone. That he had missed years. The first steps, the first words, the scraped knees and bedtime stories. The thought of it hollowed him out. He could deal with pain. He could deal with regret. But the idea of a daughter he didn't know, that tore him apart. A path forward. The next morning, he didn't go to the office. Instead, he walked into a quiet coffee shop near the clinic with a single goal: to see her again, to speak to her as a human, without pride, without defense. When Eliza walked in with Cora, both bundled against the wind, Adrian rose from his seat near the window. She froze when she saw him. "What are you doing here, Adrian?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "I'm not here to fight," he said, holding up a hand slightly. I wanted to talk, just for a minute." Eliza looked at Cora, who was busy staring at the pastry case. Then she looked back at him. "You don't have the right to show up in our lives now and ask for anything." "I'm not asking," he said carefully. "I just want the truth." Her jaw tightened. "You already heard it." "I don't believe it," he said softly. "And I don't think you do either." Eliza glared at him. For a moment, Adrian thought she might just tell him to go away. But then Cora tugged on her hand, asking for a muffin, breaking the tension. "Fine," Eliza said at last. 10 minutes, but not here." They walked outside. The wind was sharp, and Cora held a warm muffin as they walked. Adrian looked at the little girl beside him, his chest aching with the weight of all he didn't know about her. "Why did you lie?" he asked. "Daughter-son," his voice raw. Eliza didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Because you already made your choice once. I wasn't going to give you the chance to leave again." Adrian swallowed. "You're right. I made a mistake. The biggest one of my life. But I'm not leaving now." Eliza's eyes were tired, but firm. "It's not just about me anymore. You can't just show up and expect a door to open." "I don't expect anything," he said, "but I'll keep showing up anyway." And with that, she walked away again, hand in hand with Cora. But this time, she didn't look over her shoulder with anger. She looked back, just once, and her eyes said something else. Not goodbye. Not yet. A new routine. Adrian began to rearrange his life in ways he never thought possible. For a man who once thrived on structure, precision, and detachment, his days began to blend with a kind of restless energy he couldn't explain. Each morning, he found himself near the clinic, not to interfere, not to confront, but simply to be close, to remind her that he wouldn't disappear again. One time he brought coffee, leaving it on the front steps with a note that read, "No expectations, just trying." The next day, it was gone, and though she never acknowledged it, he took it as a sign that she had accepted the gesture. He showed up again, and again after that. Eliza didn't make it easy. She kept her distance, both emotionally and physically, and barely said more than a polite nod when their paths crossed. But he saw the shift, slow and subtle. The way she didn't turn away so quickly when their eyes met. The way she let Cora wave at him without pulling her hand away. The way she once lingered for a few seconds longer than necessary outside the clinic, pretending to check her phone. It was Cora who broke through the wall first. One afternoon, while Eliza was talking to another nurse, Cora walked over to Adrian, who had been sitting on a nearby bench, pretending to read emails. She stood in front of him, hands behind her back, and then pointed at his shoes. "They're very shiny," she said seriously. He smiled. "You think so?" She nodded. "My mom says shiny shoes mean someone is trying too hard." Adrian laughed despite himself. "She's not wrong." Cora tilted her head. "You're here a lot." "I guess I am," he said. "Are you here for my mom?" "I'm here for both of you," he answered honestly. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if that was allowed. Then she shrugged. "Okay, but I don't like coffee. If you bring something, bring hot chocolate." Adrian didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about how casually she had spoken to him, how natural it had felt. He didn't dare believe too quickly, but that moment gave him more hope than anything had in the last 4 years. The next day, he brought hot chocolate, 2 mugs, one for Cora with extra whipped cream, and one for Eliza with her name written on the lid. She didn't say thank you, but she took the drink, and that was enough. He began to learn their rhythms. when Cora was most talkative, when Eliza was exhausted after long shifts, what days they went to the park after work, and what days they went straight home. He never pushed. He never asked for more. He simply made himself available, a consistent presence in their lives. And with time, Eliza began to let her guard down, the truth and the future. On a blustery Thursday, Adrian offered to walk them to their car with an umbrella. Eliza, caught off guard by the sudden downpour, accepted without much resistance. As they walked, Cora asked him if he had any kids. Adrian hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Not that I know of." Eliza looked at him, her expression unreadable. Cora nodded. "That's good. Then maybe you won't forget about me." Neither of the adults responded, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the rain. Later that night, Adrian sat in his apartment, looking out at the city skyline, thinking about that one simple sentence. "Maybe you won't forget about me." The truth hit him harder than he expected. Cora already felt his presence in her life, somewhere between a stranger and something more, and she didn't yet know if she should trust it. But she noticed. She wanted to believe. Adrian couldn't escape the weight of what that meant, that she had gone 4 years without knowing him, and yet something inside her was open to the idea. It made him want to fight harder. Eliza called him the next morning. It was the first time she had called him in years. "Can you meet us at the park?" she asked, her voice quiet. He said yes before she could explain. They met near the swings. Cora was running with other children, laughing, her giggles bouncing as she moved. Eliza stood with her arms crossed, not defensively, just waiting. "I didn't call because I've changed my mind," she said. "I called because I need to understand what you're doing." "I'm trying," he answered. "Trying to do what, exactly? Be in her life, in mine, make yourself feel better?" He took a deep breath. "I don't need to feel better. I need to be accountable." Eliza looked away, watching Cora chase another little girl across the grass. "You can't make up for 4 years." "I know," he said, "but I can be present for the next 4, and every year after that." She was silent for a long time. Then, still not looking at him, she said, "She doesn't know she might be your father." The air between them instantly changed. It felt sharp, electric, as if something big had just been said aloud for the first time. "I suspected," Adrian said softly. "She was an infant when I left," Eliza whispered. "And after what happened, I didn't trust you. I didn't want to go through a test or a fight. I just wanted to raise her in peace. I understand." But now, she hesitated. "Now she's asking questions, and I don't want to lie to her." Adrian felt his heart squeeze. "So now what?" Eliza finally turned to him, and in her eyes, he saw fear, but also honesty. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "But if you're really serious about knowing her, if you're serious, then maybe it's time we all stopped pretending." He didn't respond with words. He just nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. Because deep down, he knew this was the beginning of something that could change everything. And this time, he wouldn't run. A father's love. Adrian had never approached anything in his life without a plan, but when it came to Cora, all the structure he had once relied on vanished. This wasn't a negotiation or a strategy. This was about presence. Real, consistent presence. After that conversation in the park, something between him and Eliza shifted. She wasn't welcoming him with open arms, but she wasn't shutting him out either. She allowed him into her world in small doses. Weekend mornings at the park, quick dinners at a nearby cafe, the occasional preschool drop-off or pickup. It was all tentative, as if she were testing him. And he understood why. He had given her every reason to doubt him. But this time, He didn't flinch under the weight of her caution. He accepted it. Because the only way forward was to earn back what he had thrown away. Cora, on the other hand, didn't feel the same fear. She was curious, bright, unfiltered, in the way only children can be. She started drawing pictures of the three of them, stick figures with names, always with a sun in the corner and big, crooked smiles. She told her teacher at school that Adrian was her friend who always comes back, and something in that broke and healed him at the same time. He still wasn't her father by name, but she already felt he was something constant, something permanent, and that was more than he deserved. One evening, Eliza invited him to join them at a small school event. Cora's class was having a family night, where students showcased small art projects and sang songs about community. Adrian arrived early, dressed in a navy sweater instead of his usual business suit, with a small bouquet of daisies for Cora. When she saw him in the hallway, she ran full speed and hugged him around the waist. "You came," she said, as if there was any doubt. He knelt and handed her the flowers, watching her eyes light up. "You brought my favorites," she said, beaming. Eliza stood nearby, watching the exchange in silence. She didn't say much at first, but he noticed her expression soften. Just a little, the way it always did when Cora was happy. The room was packed with parents and colorful paper crafts taped to the walls. Cora's drawing of our family was pinned to the board near the window. Adrian saw it before she said anything. 3 figures, one with long brown hair, labeled Mommy, a smaller one with curls and a pink dress, me, and a taller figure, drawn with dark hair and blue dots for eyes, simply labeled Adrian. He stood in front of the picture longer than he intended. Eliza joined him, her voice quiet. "She drew that without telling me. I didn't know she had started putting your name on it." "I didn't ask her to," he said softly. "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." After the performance, they shared a quiet dinner at a nearby cafe. Cora fell asleep in the booth before dessert arrived, her head on Eliza's shoulder, a crayon still clutched in her hand. Adrian watched them both, and he realized how easily this could have never happened, how close he had been to walking past that gala and never knowing what he had missed. "I think we should do the test," Eliza said suddenly. He looked up. "The paternity test," she said, her eyes fixed on their sleeping daughter. "It's time," he swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Not because I need confirmation, I already know, but one day she's going to ask, and I want to be able to give her the truth, not a guess. Not a maybe, something real." He reached across the table and put his hand on hers. "Whatever the result, I'm not leaving." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm ready." The following week, they went together. Adrian insisted on a private clinic where things would be handled discreetly. Eliza held Cora's hand the entire time, while Adrian filled out the forms, his own hand shaking slightly as he signed them. The test was simple, just a cheek swab, and Cora didn't even flinch. "Is this like science?" she asked, and Adrian chuckled. "Exactly like science," he said. They were told the results would take a few days. It felt like waiting for a verdict, even though his heart already knew. Those 3 days were the longest of his life. He avoided his office, turned off his phone, and stayed close to home. Every knock on the door or phone buzz made his pulse quicken. When the envelope finally arrived, he didn't open it right away. Instead, he drove to Eliza's apartment. She was already waiting, Cora coloring on the floor while a movie played quietly in the background. He held out the envelope, but she shook her head. "You should open it," she said. With trembling hands, he tore the paper, pulled out the single page, and read the words that made him catch his breath. Probability of paternity, major. His throat tightened, and his eyes welled up with tears before he could stop them. Eliza walked over, resting a hand softly on his arm. He looked up, his voice cracking. "She's mine." "She always was," she said softly. Cora looked up from the floor, not understanding the full gravity of what had just been confirmed, but smiling at the way her mother and Adrian were standing so close. "Are we going to celebrate now?" she asked. Adrian knelt beside her and pulled her into his arms. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "We are." And in that moment, surrounded by crayons and cartoons and a soft yellow light, Adrian Vanavar finally understood what it meant to have everything. More importantly, what it meant to fight for it. A promise. Kept Adrian thought the test would change everything, that knowing the truth would immediately give him a legitimate place in Cora's life. But instead, it made the reality feel heavier. He now had proof, undeniable, scientific, but he still didn't have a roadmap for how to step into fatherhood after 4 years of absence. There were no guidebooks for making up for lost time, no guaranteed way to build trust with a child whose first memories didn't include you. What the test gave him was permission. What he needed to earn was a sense of belonging. Eliza stayed quiet in the days that followed. She didn't pull away, but she didn't rush toward anything either. She watched him carefully, the same way someone might observe a fragile truce, wondering when or if it would break. Eliza did let him pick Cora up from preschool one afternoon, and the teacher smiled at him and said, "She talks about you a lot now. You must be pretty special." That moment hit him harder than he expected. He realized, standing in that hallway covered in crayon drawings and alphabet posters, that he wasn't fighting for something abstract. He was fighting for bedtime stories, for missed birthdays, for little fingers clutching his hand at crosswalks, and for innocent questions at dinner. One night, after Cora had gone to bed, Adrian and Eliza sat together on her old couch, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. He watched her as she scrolled through photos on her phone, pictures of Cora as a baby, learning to walk, finger painting, dressed as a pumpkin for Halloween. Each photo was a small wound, beautiful and painful. Adrian had missed it all. "I should have been there," he said quietly. Eliza didn't answer right away. Then she looked up and said, "You weren't ready." He felt that slowly. He wasn't, but he still should have tried. "You're here now," she said, "and she knows it." They sat like that for a while. No promises, no dramatic declarations. Just two people slowly acknowledging what was still broken and what maybe could be rebuilt. In the following weeks, Adrian integrated himself into their daily lives in small, consistent ways. He helped Cora with puzzles. He read her books that she made him repeat 3 times in a row. He packed her lunch when Eliza was running late, and even started to learn how to braid her hair, which Cora found both hilarious and endearing. He didn't try to replace anything. He just became part of what was already there, a new layer, a steady rhythm. Eliza began to let some of her defenses down. One morning, she called him in a panic because Cora had a fever, and she had to leave for a shift at the hospital. Adrian didn't hesitate. He spent the entire day with her, making soup, building pillow forts, and watching cartoons. That night, Cora was asleep on his chest, and Eliza returned home to find them tangled on the couch, a quiet peace between them. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes shining. "You didn't have to stay all day," she whispered. Adrian smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Another night, they had dinner together, just the two of them, for the first time in years. They didn't talk about the past. Instead, they talked about Cora's love for dinosaurs, about a fundraiser Eliza was organizing at the hospital, and about the small garden Adrian had started on his rooftop, which Cora insisted on calling the Butterfly Farm. It was the first time Eliza had laughed in front of him in a long time. Really laughed, full-faced, as if she had forgotten for a moment what had happened before. After dessert, when the check came and he reached for it, she touched his wrist gently. "You don't always have to prove something," she said. "It's not about proving," he replied. "It's about being here. It's about showing up every single day until it's something that's expected." Eliza stared at him for a long time. "You're not the same person I left." He held her gaze without flinching. "No, I hope I'm not." They left the restaurant in silence, but it wasn't awkward. The air between them had shifted, thicker with possibility. On the way back, Cora called them from Eliza's phone, just to say goodnight. And when Adrian said, "I love you," Cora answered with a sleepy automatic, "I love you too," before hanging up. It was a small moment, but it was everything. That night, Adrian stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights pulse and flicker. His life had always been defined by his ability to build and to win, to control outcomes. But now, the most valuable thing he had was something he couldn't force or buy. It had to be cultivated, slowly, honestly. He had never felt so vulnerable, or so alive. He didn't know what the next chapter would hold, but he knew he would be there to write it. With them, a family rebuilt, the season began to change. The first signs of spring appeared in the city, soft greens blooming on the trees, longer days, and the kind of breeze that hinted at warmth instead of warning of cold. Adrian felt it in his own life too. This subtle shift, this quiet thaw. Things between him and Eliza were no longer stuck in a limbo. They were no longer defined by regret or defensiveness, but by something far more complex and fragile. Rebuilding. He knew how to rebuild companies, reputations, fortunes. But rebuilding trust, rebuilding family, that was new territory. And yet he faced it the only way he knew how. Fully, relentlessly, with everything he had. He and Eliza weren't officially together. Not in the way people expect when they hear a father has come back into a child's life. There were no labels, no declarations, no public acknowledgement of what they were or what they were becoming. But they were together in the way that mattered. She let him in. He was there for school pickup, for doctor's appointments, for bedtime stories, and Saturday mornings filled with spilled cereal and cartoons. Sometimes, after Cora was asleep, they would sit together on her small sofa, their shoulders brushing, and watch old movies without saying a word. Sometimes they would talk about nothing. Books, headlines, silly things Cora had said that day. Sometimes they didn't need to talk at all. One Sunday afternoon, Cora asked if they could go to the botanical gardens. Eliza had a late shift, so Adrian took her alone. He packed snacks, found her favorite sweater, and even remembered to bring tissues, because the last time they went, Cora had cried when a butterfly landed on her head. At the gardens, she ran ahead, skipping from flower to flower, her curiosity boundless. She told him about the colors, about which ones made her feel happy, or sleepy, or brave. And when they sat under a tree near the koi pond, she looked at him and said, "You're my daddy, right?" Adrian froze. She had never said it out loud before, never asked directly. His throat tightened. He looked at her, those big blue eyes watching him so seriously, so sincerely, as if she had been carrying that question for days. "Yes," he finally said, "I'm your daddy." She blinked, then smiled. "I thought so." And with that, she leaned into his side and began to eat apple slices, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. When Eliza got home that night, Cora ran into her arms and announced the news. "I asked him, and he said yes. He's my daddy." Eliza met Adrian's eyes across the room, and for the first time she didn't flinch at the word. She nodded and whispered, "He is." That moment solidified something. It gave shape to everything they had been avoiding. It was no longer about paternity tests. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about stepping into the roles they had long resisted out of fear. And Adrian, for the first time, allowed himself to truly feel it. He was a father, and he wanted, more than anything, to be a partner too. He started spending more nights at her apartment. Sometimes he slept on the couch, sometimes he didn't. He started leaving spare clothes in a drawer. Cora began calling for him for everything. Lost socks, nightmares, help opening juice boxes. Eliza didn't resist. She let it happen. Slowly, steadily, it began to feel like a family. But not everyone saw it that way. One evening, Eliza's sister Lauren visited. She hadn't seen Adrian since the days before the breakup, and when she walked in and found him in the kitchen cooking, she immediately tensed. "What's he doing here?" she asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Eliza put down the book she was reading and stood up. "He's been helping with Cora," Lauren scoffed. "Helping? Are we pretending the last 4 years didn't happen?" Adrian didn't respond. He just kept stirring the pot on the stove, his hands tight around the spoon. Eliza walked closer to her sister, quiet but firm. "I'm not pretending anything. I remember every minute of what happened. But I also see who he is now, and I know what he means to Cora." "She doesn't need someone who left," Lauren said, her voice sharp. "She needs someone who came back and stayed," Eliza replied, "and that's exactly what he's doing." Lauren left shortly after, clearly unconvinced. Adrian didn't say a word about it. He didn't try to defend himself. But later that night, when Eliza found him on the balcony, he looked at her and said, "I know I still have to prove I deserve this." "You don't have to prove it to her," Eliza said. "Just keep proving it to us." That week, Adrian began the process of changing his will, adding Cora as his legal heir. He set up a college fund in her name. He talked to a lawyer about legal acknowledgement, not for ego or for acclaim, but because he wanted to be there in every official way, not just in the quiet moments. Eliza hesitated at first, not out of fear, but out of an instinct to protect. But when she saw how serious he was, how much this wasn't about control or erasing the past, she agreed to move forward. They told Cora together, sitting on the rug in her room, surrounded by stuffed animals. Adrian explained what it meant, and when he said, "This just means I'll always be there, no matter what," Cora nodded solemnly and said, "Okay, but you already are." That night, after she was asleep, Adrian held Eliza's hand as they sat at the foot of the bed. "She knows we're hers," he said softly. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder, "and I think I'm starting to believe that you're ours." Outside, the city hummed as usual, but inside that room, it was quiet, peaceful, real, and for the first time in years, Adrian didn't feel like he was chasing something lost. He felt like he was home, a future beyond forgiveness. Spring faded into summer, and the city transformed with it. Sidewalk cafes filled up, children's laughter echoed in parks, and the sun stayed in the sky later. For Adrian, the longer days felt symbolic. His time with Cora and Eliza was no longer divided into borrowed moments and earned ones. It had become natural, like a rhythm that no longer needed to be rehearsed. Cora began introducing him to strangers as "my dad," not with shy glances, but with pride, as if she was reclaiming something she had always known in her heart. And Adrian never corrected her. He never would. Yet, for all the light that had begun to filter into their lives, there were shadows that hadn't completely disappeared. Adrian knew that healing wasn't linear. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in fits and starts, in sudden bursts of hope, followed by an unexpected fear. And sometimes it manifested as silence. Eliza had been quiet for days, not distant, not cold, just more still. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She stayed up at night more than usual, her breathing slightly ragged, her thoughts clearly racing. One night, after Cora was asleep, Adrian finally asked, "What's going through your head?" Eliza didn't answer right away. Then she got up and walked to the window, her arms crossed around herself. "I don't know what happens now," she said softly. "I don't know how this works. With us. With you." Adrian got up and joined her, standing close but not touching. "We don't need to figure it all out at once," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But it's scary, because I let myself believe this could work. And the last time I believed in us, it almost broke me." He understood. Her fear wasn't irrational. It was something he had earned. Trust wasn't a switch you could flip, and love didn't erase history. It just asked you to carry it better. "I don't want to hurt you again," he said. "That's my fear. We're trying, and we'll keep trying. Every day." For a long time, Eliza said nothing. Then she nodded and leaned into him. Not all the way, but just enough. And that was all the answer he needed. The next weekend, they took Cora to the coast, a small beach town, quiet and clean, where no one knew them, and nothing was expected. They stayed in a rental cottage with creaking floors and an old hammock in the back. Cora collected shells in a plastic bucket, and Adrian taught her how to skip flat stones across the water's surface. They roasted marshmallows, built sand castles, and watched the tide come in. One night, as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold, Cora ran down the beach, and Eliza and Adrian walked behind her in the wet sand. She took his hand again. This time, it wasn't with caution. It was with a certainty. "I forgot what it felt like to be safe," she said. He squeezed her hand. "Me too." It was in that moment that he knew he wanted a forever. Not out of guilt or responsibility, or because he was trying to make amends, but because he had never loved anyone like he loved this version of them. Messy, real, bruised by time, but stronger for it. He didn't need perfection. He needed this. Later that night, after Cora had fallen asleep snuggled between them with sea salt still in her hair, Adrian turned to Eliza. "I want to build a life with you. The kind that doesn't depend on everything being okay all the time. I want to be a part of every hard thing and every good thing. I don't want a second chance. I want the rest of my life." Eliza looked at him, her face lit only by the moonlight filtering through the window. Tears were in her eyes, but her voice didn't waver. "I want that too," she whispered. That night, for the first time, they didn't just share a bed. They shared a future. It was unspoken, but understood in the way they moved, in the way they held each other, in the way they didn't rush to define it, because they didn't need to anymore. A new beginning. When they returned to the city, something between them had solidified. There were no more questions about whether he belonged. There was only what they would do with the time they had ahead of them. Adrian didn't go back to his old life. He didn't want to. The boardroom could wait. The deals could wait. But Cora's piano recital, Eliza's new promotion at the hospital, their quiet dinners in the apartment lit by fairy lights, that couldn't wait. Those were the moments around which he was now building his world. He was no longer a man trying to fix what he broke. He was a man trying to cultivate something lasting, something beautiful, with the woman he never stopped loving and the daughter He was just beginning to know. As summer faded into fall, Adrian had become a part of their world so completely that the past felt like another lifetime, one they rarely had to talk about. His presence was no longer an adjustment for Cora, but an expectation. She called for him in the middle of the night when she had nightmares. Pinky promised him that he would go to every school event, and saved a seat for him at breakfast with her stuffed animals, even when he was running late. She trusted him completely now, and that trust shaped him in every part. Eliza had begun to relax too. She no longer watched the clock when he was with Cora, or held her breath, waiting for him to disappoint them. She laughed more. She let him carry some of the emotional burden. She let him see her when she was tired, frustrated, or vulnerable. He saw her at her best and at her worst, and loved her equally through both. There were still moments when fear would creep in, when the memory of what he had done and how easily he had once walked away threatened to stand between them. But those moments were fleeting now, and they never stayed long enough to sow real doubt. Because he wasn't running anymore. He was showing up again and again, until the simple act of showing up became normal, not something extraordinary. They moved in together quietly, not with a grand announcement or dramatic gestures, but slowly, piece by piece. It started with Adrian's toothbrush in the bathroom, then a drawer in the bedroom, then his name added to the lease, not because they needed it, but because it made it official. Cora asked if that meant they were a real family now, and Eliza looked at her and said, "We've been a real family for a while." And it was true. A paper didn't make them a family. The present did. The effort did. The love did. That fall, Cora started kindergarten. Adrian took the entire morning off for her first day, standing alongside Eliza as they walked her into the classroom filled with tiny desks and colorful posters. Cora wore a blue dress and her hair in 2 braids, and she held both of their hands as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Before she let go, she looked at them seriously and said, "You'll both be here when I get out, right?" Adrian knelt to her height and said, "Always," and he meant it. The teacher took Cora's hand and led her inside the room, and Eliza leaned into Adrian the moment she was out of sight. "She didn't even cry," she whispered, half proud and half heartbroken. "She's growing up. She's brave," Adrian said, "just like her mom." That afternoon, school, they took her for ice cream and let her stay up a little later than usual. It became a ritual. Every milestone was celebrated together. Every difficult day was faced as a unit. They were a team now, the 3 of them, bound by something far stronger than convenience or circumstance. They were bound by choice, a timeless love. One night, just as winter began to show its first breath in the air, Adrian planned something quiet, but meaningful. No big crowds, no flash, just the 3 of them. He took Eliza and Cora to the botanical gardens they had gone to months before, where Cora had first asked him if he was her daddy. This time, the paths were lit with small lanterns for a winter night walk, and Cora danced between the lights in her tiny coat and hat, completely oblivious to what was coming. They stopped at the same bench under the tree, near the koi pond. Cora ran ahead again, chasing her own shadow. Adrian turned to Eliza, his heart racing. "I never thought I'd get a second chance like this," he said. "Not just with you, but with all of this. With a family. With something that truly matters." Eliza smiled softly. "You made it matter." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Not flashy, not excessive, just simple and real. She held her breath. "I know this doesn't erase the past, and I know nothing about us has been easy," he said. "But I don't want perfect. I want honest. I want the mornings where you're tired, The nights where we argue about silly things, the quiet moments in between. I want all of it with you. Will you marry me? Eliza didn't hesitate. She took his face in her hands and kissed him with a certainty that made the air around them still. Yes, she whispered, 1,000 times. Yes. A few yards away, Cora clapped and cheered. Does this mean I get to throw flower petals? Both of them laughed through tears, and Adrian nodded. You bet you do, he chuckled. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends in the spring. Cora walked down the aisle in a little white dress and a flower crown, beaming as if she were the star of the show, which in many ways she was. Eliza walked the aisle alone to the middle when Cora ran and grabbed her hand, and the two of them walked the rest of the way together. Adrian waited, his heart pounding, knowing that he wasn't just marrying the woman he loved. He was stepping fully, and finally, into the life he was always meant to have. There were tears. There was laughter. There was dancing late into the night. And at the end of it all, as they lay curled up together in the silence after everyone had left, Adrian held Eliza's hand and kissed her temple. You saved me, Adrian said. Eliza smiled sleepily. No, you just remembered who you were supposed to be. And that's how their story began, not with a perfect start, but with 1,000 imperfect moments, woven together by effort, faith, and the choice to keep trying. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the mistakes, not the time lost, but the love that had grown in its place. A love they would never let go of again. Questions for the reader. How does the story's focus on redemption and second chances resonate with you? Do you think Adrian's journey was more about making amends for his past, or genuinely embracing a new future? What does the little girl's role as a bridge between Adrian and Eliza teach us about the power of innocence and forgiveness? What do you think of this rewritten story? If you'd like to continue creating stories or have another idea in mind, feel free to tell me. I'm here to help you bring your narratives to life. I'm always excited to hear what we'll create together next.